Hello and welcome to Security Scan. I am Vishal Dahiya and today we will discuss Indo-Bangladesh border talks. Both India and Bangladesh share a unique bond, a historic one which is based on common cultural ties, shared principles and values. But despite that historic bond, there are several issues which are a bone of contention between India and Bangladesh, and most of them relate to cross-border or rather trans-border crimes such as human trafficking, smuggling and illegal immigration. Now, illegal migrants are an issue which India considers as a serious threat to its national security. Since 1971, millions of Bangladeshis have crossed over into India and most of them illegally. The recent exodus of Rohingyas from Myanmar has also complicated the issue. Now, both sides have also taken several measures to try and find a solution to all these issues. And recently, the 45th biannual meeting of the DG level talks between both the countries took place, which also focused on trying to find a solution to all these issues. For a more detailed discussion on these topics, we have with us today a distinguished panel of guests. Let me introduce you to them, starting with Mr. Pinak Chakravarty, who is former High Commissioner of Bangladesh. We also have with us Mr. S.T. Muni, a distinguished fellow of IDSA and Professor Emeritus JNU. We also have with us former DG of BSF, Mr. E.N. Mohan. Let me begin with you, Mr. Pinak, straight away, since you've been there in Bangladesh also as the High Commissioner, as the representative of our country. What are the major issues which you would like to list out as far as the border tussle between both countries is concerned?
I think the major issues are really trans-border movements, that illegal movements. What we call human migration, illicit trafficking in drugs. Then, of course, trade, trans-border trade, what we call smuggling, or we can even call it informal trade, because there is trade which goes across, which is not recorded, basically. And that is a major issue. Then there used to be a lot of cattle smuggling. Okay. There used to be a lot of drugs, and also increasing the what we call FICN, or the fake Indian currency rackets that go on along the border. Now, these happen because the border is porous to some extent.
Almost 4,000 kilometers long.
It's a huge border. It's our largest border with any neighbor. And we've tried to fence the border to some extent, but not the whole of it is fenced. There are riverine areas which are not fenced and which need to be patrolled. So there is a cross-border movement which goes on continuously, and obviously all illegal mostly. The legal parts are of course channeled through the border stations that we have, the formal border stations. But much of those activity, the illegal activity, takes place across the border in an informal way and through mafias on both sides who operate across the border. So this is a big problem, and I think the border forces of both countries have to contend with this problem. The governments have to contend with this problem and see how best we can resolve it.
Okay, so all in all, Mr. Pinak has summed up the kind of issues which are there. Let me bring in Mr. E.N. Mohan here. You've been the man in charge of the force which guards the borders, not only with Bangladesh but several other places as well. But specifically with respect to Bangladesh, the issues which have been pointed out by Mr. Pinak out here, are they that tough and complicated that they cannot be dealt with on the ground, specifically with respect to the FICN, the fake Indian currency notes, as well as illegal migrants? Because these seem to be the two most contentious issues.
The biggest problem as far as Bangladesh is concerned is the volume of the people involved, human beings. Because there is probably the density of population on either side in Bangladesh as well as in West Bengal is very high, and it's simply a question of living space. How much land to cultivate? What are the number of people living on that available plot of land? The ratio is diminishing each year as each year goes by, increasing the problem. And for anybody who does the policing in that area, very frankly, the BSF would like to be deployed only on the western borders, where you can fire and finish up the matter. You can't do that here. Here the number of people...
It's much more complicated.
It's simply a question of volume of people involved. It's extremely difficult to police the Bangladesh border.
Okay, let me bring in Mr. Muni here. Mr. Muni, the force says it's quite difficult to go ahead and man the border, to police it, to ensure that none of this happens. Mr. Pinak has pointed out, saying that both sides will have to contend with it. But this places us back to square one. Where can we move forward from here?
Well, I would say that there are two types of borders we have with Bangladesh. One is with the West Bengal, the other is with the northeastern states.
Northeastern states.
And I think both differ in their character and in terms of nature of the problems, as also responses. So I do sympathize with those who are guarding the border, that it's not an easy job. But at the same time, we have been resolving problems inch by inch, slowly. This is a human engagement where the problems take a new shape with the passage of time, with the change in the context, which is with the change in economy and all that. So yes, there are problems. I think in the last about 5-10 years, 5 years at least, we have made some good institutional arrangements to handle some of these problems. At the local level are the border talks which happen. About that is the BSF and the BGB talks which take place. And over and above them, I think even at the level of national security advisors and at that time, there is a mechanism whereby India-Bangladesh bilateral issues are brought for resolution, and they are being addressed there as seriously as possible. So I don't think there is any dearth of mechanism to handle them. And there is now, at least as I said again, last 5 years or so, there is no even dearth of intent to resolve them positively, resolve them in a friendly manner. Earlier there were political differences which are no longer there.
So no political differences, no dearth of mechanism. Let's now pick up issues one by one. Let's begin with the problem of illegal migration, illegal immigrants, which is a huge problem for India. And as Mr. Mohan pointed out, that there is a huge volume involved at that particular place. As per your experience, the numbers doesn't seem to have come down as far as illegal migrants are concerned. Where can we and how can we check it at the border itself?
Well, let me first lay down the fact that migration is not a new issue. Migration has been going on from that part of land which we now call Bangladesh into the northeastern states and across today's borders. When I say today's borders, that the borders that were drawn by Radcliffe during partition. So migration precedes all that. Then of course 71 saw a huge spike in migration because of the war and the conditions that it generated. So migration is a phenomenon that is not unnatural. It has happened in the past. After all, we were one country, one land at one time. So it happened. People went here and there, everywhere for jobs, etc. It is also a fact that Bangladesh is a heavily populated country in a small piece of land. It is the delta of one of the largest river systems in the world, which creates havoc when it is, when the rivers change courses, uprooting people from their villages, etc.
And they move out in search
these are the people who lose their livelihood, who want to move. And that's the kind of people who come into India and other places across, or they go abroad or whatever. How do we control it? How do you control human beings coming across a border? Either you shoot them dead so that they don't come in. You create such a deterrence that they will not dare to come knowing that they will, which is not possible because of friendly relations, because of the kind of humanitarian and other considerations. You create a border fence to at least create some kind of control, which we have done to some extent, but even then they cut the border fence and come. So now I think what is our problem? The problem is illegal migration. If we had legal migration, then it would be at least manageable. We would know how many people are coming, who is coming, etc. and all.
So the sheer volume creates.
Unfortunately, we have not been able to get into legal migration policies between the two countries. One reason being that Bangladesh refuses to acknowledge that there is illegal migration. That has been their official position, though now less articulated, but certainly because of our good relations and mature relations today, that is not articulated very much. But this is still their position, that there is no illegal migration.
So that's one hindrance.
Because Bangladesh wants as many people in their country to go out, because they are a heavily populated country. So that is the problem, and I think the two countries have to get down to first to recognize that there is a illegal migration.
There is a problem.
There is a problem, and then to work out some kind of mechanisms. And I think India will need to look at the fact that we must allow some legal migration to take place.
Okay, let's bring in the man who's been on the ground, Mr. Ramon. You pointed out earlier that sheer volume, huge volume of human beings involved is something which is a big problem. Apart from that, what are the challenges which BSF as the border guarding force comes across while tackling the issue of illegal migration? There are some which pointed out by Mr. Pinak, but as the man on the ground, what are the major challenges which you face?
It's a very simple thing. The density of population is extremely high on both sides of the border, particularly on the other side. And living space has long since reached a ceiling in Bangladesh. There's no more land to cultivate.
Are the mechanisms enough? The mechanisms which are in place right now, are those mechanisms enough for the border guarding force to go ahead and deal with such a situation?
You see, when there is pressure on human beings, what will they do? When they find that there is no place to land to cultivate, they will look for a place where there is land to cultivate, and that will be towards India. So then automatically there will be a movement this side, and you are going to stop human beings, men, women, children. It's an extremely difficult job.
Okay, it is indeed an extremely difficult one. Mr. Muni, this issue is very, very sensitive when we talk about the issue of illegal migrants. This is considered a huge national security threat. So with respect to Bangladesh, which is considered, as far if you look at the entire problem of illegal migrants, then those coming from Bangladesh constitute almost majority of it, almost 90%, if not less. How can we go ahead and put in an effective mechanism to keep a check on it? As Mr. Pinak pointed out, that first we have to acknowledge that there is a problem. Both the governments will have to acknowledge.
Well, there are, again, I said two aspects when you look at it from the security angle. One is the illegal migration of human beings. And as Pinak, I take Pinak's argument little further, that for decades, I would say, Bangladesh has been consciously using this as a cushion for them, and therefore letting people go out for one reason or another.
It serves their purpose.
It served their purpose. It was also an economic compulsion for the people who are living there, and they found that this would be a good bargaining point vis-a-vis India, because otherwise they felt pressure on India.
So basically finding greener pastures across the border.
Yes, that was one reason. But secondly, and that too from the security point of view, there is another set of illegal migrations which has to be stopped in one way or the other, and that relates to vested interest, that relates to smugglers, that relate to drug traffickers, that relate to artificial, this fake currency networks. Now this is a direct threat to your security. Human beings are a long-term process which continues. And for this, I remember, for instance, Home Minister Mr. Rajnath Singh last year probably gave direct instructions that no cattle smugglers should be able to pass. Then there are insurgents who have vested interest in sending people across the border, arms smugglers. So you have to look at the nature of the problem. So far as the human migration is concerned, which is out of economic reasons or compulsions, has to be looked at from one point of view, while the other one has to be dealt as severely as possible. You know, border fencing or alerting the BSF or guarding your border far more strictly is something which has got to be done efficiently. Unfortunately, these vested interests create their network, and that network intrudes into both the country's establishments. You like it or not, local establishments in one form or the other. And this is partly a job to be done at home, to how do you streamline it. And secondly, you have to take effective measures to see that these vested interests don't flourish.
Okay, effective measures to ensure that these vested interests don't flourish. Mr. Pinak, let's move on to the second most important aspect of the cross-border thing, and that's part of the several trans-border crimes, but one which is of huge interest to our nation, that is FICN, the fake Indian currency notes. Now, as per a recent report, Bangladesh has overtaken Pakistan in terms of pushing FICN, or rather smuggling the fake currency notes into the Indian territory. Is that something which has come, which has rather come as a surprise, or is that something which is a just a result of the circumstances which might have happened specifically after demonetization?
The more porous the border, the more of these things will come in.
Okay.
On the western border, now we of course say that these fake FICNs are printed in Pakistan.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if that border is more heavily policed and it's more difficult to penetrate, it will find a way through some other channels, which is through Nepal and Bangladesh. And that is why you are probably seeing, I don't know whether the demonetization or remonetization has had any effect.
Mm-hmm.
But to add to the problems today, we have the religious extremists also.
Okay.
The so-called, the jihadi, radicals, etc., who are now trying to fish in these troubled waters. We have had instances of bomb blasts in Burdwan where the Huji and other elements from JMB elements from Bangladesh took refuge.
Mm-hmm.
Now they have contacts on both sides. There are these people, religious and other organizations, who have some kind of a sympathy with their religion members from the other side,
and they're trying
including some of these jihadis who want to have their own agenda,
and they try to exploit this particular situation.
And they certainly exploit this this porous border,
mm-hmm.
and they go back and forth. They seek refuge on this side, having committed some crimes on the other side, and it goes from both sides, I think. So I think that is a new problem that we have.
Mm-hmm.
But I am happy to say that both governments are cooperating very well in terms of exchanging intelligence, exchanging information to deal with this, because it is a threat to both countries.
Okay. Let me bring in Mr. Muni here again, and since all that we've been discussing about comes back to the basics, that is the movement of illegal migrants or the involvement of the locals of Bangladesh, citizens of Bangladesh in these anti-India activities, it might be a result of their they're not being so economically prosperous. So the answer to that, which earlier was talked about in several discussions in circles, was to give more strength to Bangladesh, to enhance trade ties with Bangladesh, to give them a little more loans in terms of line of credit. Our finance minister this week has been in Bangladesh to extend third line of credit. Is that something which that area which we should be focusing more on to try and find some roundabout solutions to these problems which we are facing on the border?
I don't know more or less, but that is a dimension which has already been pursued very, very seriously. But look, Bangladesh is economically not doing too bad, incidentally.
It is not.
In terms of the rate of growth, in terms of their productivity and all that. Therefore, it is not the economic crisis. It is a question of internal distribution of the wealth which is generated.
Okay.
And if it is not equal, if it is being cornered by some people, then those who are left out would remain wherever they are. Mm-hmm. So yes, I mean, we should help Bangladesh to grow and develop much faster, much more than what it is doing, no doubt about it. But this problem would really be addressed by the Bangladesh government in terms of how they are distributing their resources.
Okay.
I think India cannot do much there in order to give a package to Bangladesh government that this is what you should be doing or you should not be doing.
Okay.
Therefore, economically, yes. In fact, we can have proposals of special economic zones, creating more jobs, creating more productivity. Yes, this is fine. But essentially, it should be a distributive part also to be tucked to that.
Okay. Do you agree, Mr. Pinak? Specifically, can't we exploit that aspect of transit for the goods which might legalize these channels, make them more routed instead of having these stages wherein people sneak in?
I think the challenge is to how to allow formal trade and reduce the informal trade.
Okay.
But don't forget, formal trade is bureaucratic. It has to go through customs, it has to go through rules, it has to go through regulations. And what does a smuggler do? He carries something, just hands it across, and it's a cash transaction, it's all over. No paperwork is there. So these are some of the problems. So ultimately, we have to become less bureaucratic, first of all, to allow smoother movement of people and trade, so that people don't feel the necessity to go to the informal and the illegal channel.
Okay.
That is one thing. The other thing, of course, is that what Professor Muni was saying just now is that we have to look at some of these issues in terms of creating more, let's say, border trading stations. We have done some work. Border hearts have been created so that some kind of informal but legal trade takes place. Now, these are being done. It's not that it's being done. Ultimately, I think the question of redistribution, that, of course, is not something India can do. It is a systemic issue within each country. In India also, we have inequities of wealth distribution. So does Bangladesh. But let me point out that Bangladesh is not doing so badly on the economic front. It has overtaken Pakistan on the per capita income, I think this year or last year. The latest data that is available, it shows that. So I think on that front, Bangladesh is doing well. It is growing over 6% in its GDP. So, and I think we must help that process
to ensure more stability. Let's bring in again the man on the ground, Mr. Mohan. Considering all that is being said, what do you believe can be done on the ground to go ahead and tackle these trans-border crimes, be it the human trafficking, be it the animal smuggling or other kinds of smuggling, specifically the illegal migration and the FICN issue?
There is no way to moderate anything there. I mean, it's cut and dried. You are checking for human smuggling, you lay ambushes in the way, and when you get a party, you have to take action against it.
So
that's all.
You have to follow the basic procedures, the SOPs, and implement them more
for example,
strongly.
Illegal smuggling, illegal trade, that's smuggling, that takes place.
Okay.
You have to enforce. That means you seize the property which is being smuggled.
Okay.
Arrest the persons concerned.
Okay. Let's take concluding comments from the other two guests. Mr. Muni, what's your viewpoint? What can we do now?
Look, we are neighbors, and these are the problems you can't wish away. As I said, you resolve one set of problems, there would be another set of problems. So what we have to do is to emphasize on two aspects: political will to resolve them positively, and proper effective mechanisms. And there I again underline it, that there are networks within each of the countries which are promoting these illegal transactions in one way or the other. And if you cannot handle it, simply can't make it a bilateral issue. Therefore, your bureaucratic structures have to be far more efficient and accountable than what they have been.
Okay, Mr. Pinak, concluding remarks.
Well, I would say that it is a battle on two fronts, one domestic and one on the border.
One on the border.
So I think we have to fight it on both fronts. It has to be a holistic kind of a approach. Otherwise, we will be fighting one element and something else is going to happen all the time. So that is where I would leave it. But one thing, let me conclude by saying the political will is there today to deal with this situation. Of course, we need the resources, we need the manpower to do all these things.
It's there, it should not vanish.
And it should not vanish. But then political will is a factor of the kind of political leadership that exists at a particular point in time.
And that should be made.
We are fortunate that we have political leaderships on both sides who recognize that this is an opportunity that we should not.
So this is an opportunity which we should seize. This is a moment which we should capitalize upon. And as our guests are pointing out, that better and effective mechanisms to go ahead and deal with these kind of problems should be more promoted, and those mechanisms which are already in place, they should be given a bit more of boost, and the force on the ground should also be given that much space to deal with the issues on the ground where the problems originate. We'll come back again next week with a different topic and a different set of guests. Till then, keep watching Rajya Sabha Television.